Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Vinny Johnson with 1 second to go. He's got it.
Hello and welcome to the Motor City Hoops Podcast. If you are new to the Motor City Hoops Podcast, I'm your host, Bryce Simon, a former D1 Hooper, current teacher, coach, husband, father of 3 amazing kids, and contributor to Detroit Bad Boys of SB Nation. Before we get this episode started and I introduce our amazing guests, I want to encourage you to go check out some content from the past week. Check out episode 82, where I was joined by Matt Issa, NBA writer for basketballnews.com and 137 PM. Also, I still want to encourage you to go listen to episode 80 with Chris Oliver of Basketball Immersion. That is an episode that is not time sensitive and a great listen for any and all basketball fans. As always, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Motor City Hoops and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you never miss out on any content. And today, the content just keeps getting better as I am joined by reporter for NBAonTNT and host for NBA TV, bringing us some incredible NBA knowledge, Jared Greenberg. Jared, welcome to the Motor City Hoops Podcast, and thank you for joining us.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. One thing we love about getting non-Piston specific guests is they give us an outside and unbiased perception and perspective on this team and its players. And with the upcoming trade deadline and massive amount of trade rumors around Jerami Grant and others, we thought this was the perfect time to get Jared on. So we'll be getting his thoughts on the trade value of this roster, along with his thoughts on Coach Casey, the front office, and the restoration in general. But to start us off, Jared, we're recording this right after the Pistons' 108-135 loss to the Suns on Sunday, a game where Cade Cunningham actually got ejected. He had 21 points in 24 minutes. I just want to ask this, because there was a lot of Devin Booker trash talk. I've always said I would love to sit front row at an NBA game. You've sat close. You've been right. Like, how cool, I don't know if it's cool, how entertaining is the trash talk that goes on in an NBA game?
Yeah, it's really cool to be that close and to, just to see the body language and the back and forth of players and coaches and, just seeing, riding the momentum of the game, how things change. But yeah, there's no doubt, like there's certainly, and it's interesting, the players that do talk versus the players that don't talk and some of the stuff. I mean, most of it's just funny, right? Like today, what happened with Cade was just a funny thing, I think, and maybe a misunderstanding. But it's I don't take for granted having the best seat in the house. A lot of times, it's one of the coolest aspects of the job. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, so you brought up the other dynamic, and that's actually one as a high school coach that I think would be really cool. Like, what is it like? Do you ever find yourself watching those interactions between player and coach, player and assistant coach, maybe a coaching staff in general? Like, can you just give us a little bit what that's like, getting to see that, maybe the body language, positive or negative, that you've been – you don't have to give us specific examples, but just in general.
Yeah, no, it's a huge part, particularly when I'm there for TNT and I'm the courtside reporter for a game. That's something that I try and pay a lot of attention to is the interactions between coaches and players, coaches and assistant coaches, and especially, at the NBA level now when there are so many coaching staffs that have a guy who essentially is like an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator, watching them communicate with players and calling out plays. And also, in the NBA, which is always fascinating, is that like nobody has a secret playbook anymore. Every team has so much knowledge of what the other teams do. So it's really funny to hear when a play call is called out and then the other team calls it out themselves, like identifying exactly what's about to happen. It's a matter of, can you stop it? So those are the cool things that I get to see on a pretty regular basis.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you brought that up. Like, that's one thing I'm really into is the scouting, again, especially with my high school team. And I like that whenever the other team can call out a play and then I can tell our guys exactly what's coming. And so it's cool to hear you talk about that with an NBA game. So you brought up the Cade Cunningham thing, which, like you said, was, for a Pistons fan, it wasn't necessarily funny, but it's just kind of a weird deal with the point. And, Cade isn't necessarily a huge trash. I want to ask in general about Cade. I feel like fans don't think he's getting a great whistle here. Is this something like fans should just be like, he's a rookie. No rookies get a good whistle. Like, would you agree with that? Have you seen other number one picks get a better whistle? No. I mean, is that just part of, growing up in the NBA and like you have to go through those things?
Yeah, I think no doubt. And particularly the way Cade plays too, right? Like you can't compare him to, other number one picks who are bigs. When he's got the ball in his hand as much as he does and he's dictating the offense, he still has to learn the referees as much as the referees have to learn him. And I think as we've seen this year, there's a big transition period with kind of the new emphasis and of the rules for how they're not allowing offensive players to kind of walk into fouls the way they used to. So I think that's something. And then, like what happened today, I think, that's an example of Cade not totally understanding what the officials are instructed to do in terms of taunting. And clearly from the official standpoint, it appeared as if he was pointing right in the direction of Jalen Smith after he just dunked on him, right? And that in itself is an obvious technical foul in the NBA. Now, Cade come back and says, no, I was pointing at my boys who were in the stands. Well, you just got to learn that if you're going to do that, you got to be a little more inconspicuous about it.
Yeah, especially when you already have one technical to your name.
That's a great point too. You can't, as much of a roller coaster as Cade maybe has been on, at times he's looked really good. At times he's looked like a rookie. No big deal. Those are things. But he has to learn his value to this team, right? And the Pistons are only going to go as far as Cade goes the next several years. And that's something that, and again, he doesn't have this major history, as you said, of being an emotional player like a Draymond Green type. But, he has to learn that you can't put yourself in position, or you can't put the referee in position to decide whether you're going to be playing in this game or whether you're going to be in a locker room.
Absolutely. And Jared, I didn't ask beforehand. I don't know how much of this specific game you got to watch. I actually only got to watch the first half, and then I had practice and some stuff with my team. But if you did get a chance to watch this game, did you have any other takeaways, either specific to Cade or the rest of the Pistons, or Cade for the whole year, what you've seen from him in his rookie season?
I didn't get a chance to watch too much of today's game against Phoenix, but I think that there are just some young struggles when you're throwing out this lineup of pretty much all guys who are 4 or 5 years of experience or less going up against arguably the best team in the NBA. That's kind of the result you're going to get. So I don't know. I think there were some obvious struggles today. And nothing major, I think, that you're going to point out, because again, it was against the Phoenix Suns, a team that's been playing some pretty good basketball this year. But Cade, again, tough for him because dealing with some injuries. I think learning how to play, and I'm really curious to see, and I don't know what the answer is here, what the short and long term decision is going to be. But I think we were all intrigued by Cade playing in the backcourt with Killian Hayes and how that would go. I don't know that we have found any answers in that. I think Killian has certainly struggled this year. Cade's had his moments where you say, oh my goodness, he's going to be in the Rookie of the Year conversation. And then he's had other moments, like I said, where, he hasn't necessarily shot the ball well or made some great decisions. But I think that you got to be excited about the future, I would feel, if you're a Pistons fan, about Cade. I think right now he's probably not the front runner for Rookie of the Year, but I also think we've got to keep that stuff in perspective. Like, I understand fans, how much pride they take in their favorite players or their favorite team, and guys on those teams winning certain awards like Rookie of the Year, MVP, or being All NBA or whatever it is. The thing that I always caution fanatics about is that doesn't necessarily dictate the type of career the player is going to have, right? Like, Cade could win Rookie of the Year and not have a great NBA career. He also, and the more likely scenario, I think, at this point, is he's not going to win Rookie of the Year and could still have a really phenomenal career and lead the Pistons in the right direction for the next decade.
So you brought this up, and I actually didn't have this on the outline, and I actually agree with you, Jared. I don't think he's probably going to win Rookie of the Year because the Pistons just flat aren't going to win enough games, and that's okay. For me, I don't really care whether he wins it or not. I want to continue to see what we've seen from him. I want to see it more consistent. You brought up the turnover issues. That's something he's cleaned up a little bit, but has to be more. Who do you have Rookie of the Year, or who do you think is going to end up winning the Rookie of the Year in the NBA?
I think right now it's really a toss-up, I think, between Mobley, Barnes, and then not far behind them is Wagner in Orlando. I think those three guys, to me, are the front runners, and then Cade would fall behind them.
Just before that, you mentioned the future of the Pistons. And so let's get into that because that's what I really wanted to talk about. And we're actually going to talk about, well, real quick for the listeners, Killian Hayes did leave the bench in the fourth quarter. I reached out to some people, tried to get an answer from that. Maybe we'll get something. I don't know if it was injury related or what. But I did want to mention that from Sunday night's game. Hopefully by the time this drops on Tuesday, we'll know more about that. But I did want to throw that out there. But looking at the future, we wanted to talk with Jared about some possible free agents, some possible trade situations, those type of things. So we're going to start with the free agency because they played the Phoenix Suns today or on Sunday. And even though he ended up injuring his ankle and didn't finish the game, DeAndre Ayton is a guy that a lot of Pistons fans are excited about because, one, you talked about things they struggled with in this game. The Pistons rebounding, they got crushed on the boards. They don't have a pick and roll lob threat. They don't have somebody that defends the rim real well. So my first question, Jared, is there a real chance that DeAndre Ayton walks in free agency this offseason from the Suns?
It's going to be one of the huge questions, that we're going to watch throughout the NBA. And I was really, I was caught off guard when the Suns didn't get a deal done. You know, they had the opportunity to give him a contract offer and reach a deal that would keep him in Phoenix for several more years, and they couldn't come to an agreement. And the thing that I was most bothered by or could see being a problem is, even if he ultimately gets paid, you're creating a psychological issue with a player that's unnecessary, right? Like if you're going to pay a guy, why make him go out and find an offer sheet that essentially you're just going to match? And now he's annoyed that he had to go through this whole process when you could have shown him a year earlier how committed you are to him and that you want him to be a part of your future. And he obviously, he's coming off an NBA Finals appearance, right? Like he showed that he's a big part of a team that if they stay intact and healthy, they're going to be a contender in the West for the next several years. And I think it would be a huge loss for Phoenix if they're unable to keep DeAndre. As far as destinations for him, I think that there will be a lot of teams that want him. And I'm sure you guys see this too. As much as we talk about this is a guard league and perimeter oriented league with, so much an emphasis on the 3-point shooting, there's still a lot of really good bigs out there. And in terms of like defensively too, you've got to have the ability to guard bigs in this league because there's a lot of teams that have good bigs. And I think DeAndre Ayton is going to be somebody that more than a handful of teams are going to be willing to give a max offer sheet to next summer.
Okay, so you answered my question. That was you said he's going to get paid. You said at the beginning, and so that was my next question. So you think there's no doubt he hits restricted free agency, a max offer sheet is coming his way. No question.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to ask, and it doesn't have to be specifically to a fit with Detroit, because I don't know how realistic that is, especially him being in that high of demand. And only so many teams will be able to offer that money. But like, what is he, Jared, in terms of like, so if he comes to Detroit, let's just play this game. Does he fit well next to Cade? Can he be he would be the number 2 guy in that scenario if no other moves happen, which obviously other moves will happen. Like, is he that guy? Can he blossom into that guy? Or does he have to be like kind of the role we're seeing him in Phoenix?
I think, it's interesting because he could come there's a scenario where DeAndre Ayton could come to Detroit and put up better numbers, but the Pistons would lose more games than the Phoenix Suns won, right?
Sure,
and
absolutely.
I think Pistons fans saw that for years with Andre Drummond, right? Like he was putting up massive numbers that had people calling for him to be, an all-star. Occasionally is he in the mix at the center position for All-NBA? Those type of numbers, all those 20-20 games he had, 30-20 games. But then you have to ask yourself, are those kind of empty calories or are those numbers that could contribute to winning? I think that there's certainly, I'm not the best person to ask in terms of the X's and O's. I don't necessarily know what Dwane Casey would do, but I know back in his Toronto days, he played with bigs plenty of times, whether it was Jonas Valanciunas, some other guys that he had throughout the years, he was able to utilize them. And I think, DeAndre is still young enough where I think his offensive repertoire has the chance to be better than Andre Drummond's was. Certainly he was kind of limited in what he could do, although what he did for the Pistons all those years was really good. I think that from a rebounding standpoint, he's probably not as good, but I think again, the versatility that Drummond, that Ayton brings you, is something to be really excited about. Now, I mean, maybe you have more insight than I do on this. But I have no idea if he'd be interested in Detroit. But certainly it would make a lot of sense, I feel like, and especially with the shooting of, like a Sadiq Bey, that's a good four to have next to him. I would really like that.
Okay, nice. And so I want to ask about one more, and then we're going to get to the Pistons roster and trade value and some of that stuff. And that's Miles Bridges. Okay. Obviously having a big year for Charlotte, again, going to hit restricted free agency. I just want to ask this first. What kind of contract is Miles Bridges going to hit this summer? And do you think Charlotte is matching no matter what kind of offer sheet he may receive?
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't foresee him getting a max offer,
Okay.
Not to say that can't change, but I also think his number is going to go up significantly from what the Hornets did offer him. I think that was reported around either $60 or $80 million. There's a big discrepancy in there. I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was, but he's certainly a guy that's going to be, north of $15 million a year, I would think. And obviously, I see the connection there with a guy that's, went to Michigan State, from Flint. He'd be great back in Detroit. But something I've learned too, and I think we went through this with the Kevin Durant free agency back in the day, that just because guys are from areas, and listen, I don't know Miles Bridges personally. I don't, know what his opinion on this would be. I'm just throwing this out there because we always want to connect guys to like their home city. Not everybody wants to go home for one reason or another. And, I think people in particular cities get offended by that. But, for example, like I moved away. I'm not a professional athlete, but I moved away for work. And I'm not itching to go back to the home city that I grew up in, unless there was, something that was really, really enticing. I'm not running to that right now. And I think we oftentimes forget that the professional athletes are human beings too, who have families and feelings and desires and geographical things that they care about, and money and taxes are a big part of it. But sometimes people want to live in a warm weather city, or sometimes people don't like the warm weather, or whatever it may be. So, I don't know what Miles Bridges' future is, but I certainly think that he's going to get paid big time. His numbers to start the year were incredible, and he was the runaway, the first 2 months of the season for most improved player in the NBA. His numbers are still good, but they have dipped significantly from the first couple of months of the season.
So I did look it up, and it was a 4-year, $60 million offer. That's okay. via Bleacher Report. Just a real quick Google search. But I really love what you brought up there, kind of towards the end, Jared. And that's these people are humans, professional athletes, male, female, whatever sport. And I do. We never really find these things out very often, but I do wonder how much the stuff you brought up plays into these decisions. Like maybe my wife or husband, depending on, maybe they want to live here. Maybe my kids really like this school. Maybe we like this locale based on, weather and those type of things. And like you say, even taxes, where there's no state income tax in some of those states. So I do think I know exactly what you mean. I just moved away from my hometown, 18 months ago, and people are like, what are you doing? And it's like, sometimes there's just things that you like to get away from it. And so I love what you brought up about that with like the different reasons somebody may choose a free agent destination.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's not to say there aren't people out there who do, have desires to go home. That certainly is possible. But I think we just automatically connect people to certain cities, whether they grew up there, went to college there, or have family there. And all of a sudden, we're making decisions for them saying, yeah, they should go back there. And it's like, well, maybe winning a championship is more important, or maybe the money is better somewhere else, or maybe I just, like you said, my wife or my partner doesn't want to live in that city, or, whatever it may be. So there's a million different things.
Absolutely. So let's transition into this Pistons roster, and we're going to go through, we don't have to speak specifically on each player because obviously they're not all going to get traded. But one thing I really wanted to talk to you about is I feel like fans, even myself, as a fan, as someone that watches every game and podcasts about them, all that, like we way overvalue our own players or the players of the team we root for, right? Like it's going to happen. And so I wanted somebody to come in and tell us like, no, this is what you should really expect. And I know you don't like necessarily have insider. Well, you probably do. You can't share it with us, inside information on some of this stuff. But let's just start with Jerami Grant. He's the one that's been talked about the most, been linked to teams like the Hawks, the Knicks, the Wizards, Lakers, on down the line. A lot of people recently have said that Aaron Gordon return is what Pistons fans should expect for Jerami Grant. Would you agree with that? Would you disagree with that? More or less? Are there other dynamics that may make him more or less valuable?
It's interesting. I think that, what we've seen again, and it's so weird too, right? Like, and you guys saw this last year when Jerami Grant said, you know what, I'm going to go prove that I could be a number one option. And he surprised a lot of people and went to Detroit and started putting up like these massive offensive numbers. You're like, wow, this is more than just like a defensive stopper type of guy. It's more than like a utilities, Swiss Army knife. He's a guy that could carry a team offensively. But the problem was Pistons weren't winning a lot of games. So it goes back to what I was saying before. I think, I don't think that's a bad comparison looking back on what the Nuggets had to give up to get Aaron Gordon. The interesting part about it, and I just covered a Nuggets game on TNT the other night, and speaking to people around the Nuggets, like they're still licking their wounds from losing Jerami Grant, right? Like
sure.
They are forced into a position right now, and listen, they have a lot of injuries, but they're forced into a position right now to ask Aaron Gordon to guard opponent point guards, right? Like that's what they're doing because they still have not found a replacement for Jerami Grant since he left the Nuggets. So I think, what's going to hurt Jerami is that, that the one time he put up massive numbers, it was on a really bad team. And the other part I think that's going to hurt him in today's game is that, he's just not that efficient of a 3-point shooter. But that being said, with the amount of versatile wings that teams that are competitive, that think that they have a chance to go deep into the playoffs, and there's a lot of them this year, they're going to need guys that can go lock up a wing. You just think about around the league of how much defense is going to be important this postseason, and the type of guys like if you're in the East and you're going to play the Nets, and assuming that the Nets get healthy, like you have to guard KD, Harden, and Kyrie. Plus, worry about some shooters out on the perimeter. So like guys like Jerami Grant are going to be significant, and teams are going to be willing to give up a hefty price to get a guy like that.
So do you have a team that you feel like could really use Jerami Grant? Like the one I keep hearing, and I don't think it makes sense for the Pistons, but the team that always comes up is the Utah Jazz. And it's because they say they need like exactly what you're talking about, like a perimeter wing defender with versatility. And obviously Jerami Grant can do that. Again, I don't know that they have, and we'll get to the assets that maybe you would be intrigued by if you were in Troy Weaver's shoes, but is it a team like the Jazz? Is it a team like the Hawks? That's a team that always comes up, and then Reddish just got traded. The Wizards are a team. Is there a team that you really hone in on that you think he would make a lot of sense for?
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think the Jazz certainly make a lot of sense. And in particular, with Joe Ingles, you've heard that maybe that the Jazz are willing to trade him. I think Atlanta to a certain degree, it makes sense. But what I think just happened, the reason why Cam Reddish got traded when he did was because DeAndre Hunter was coming back off an injury. And I think, Hunter has, many people believe, and we saw it in the playoffs at times when he wasn't hurt last year, he has the ability to be a good lockdown perimeter defender as well. But a couple of other teams that I would certainly look at, I'd look at Philadelphia. I would look at Cleveland, and I think Cleveland's going to be really interesting throughout all of this because they've been, the biggest surprise in the Eastern Conference so far this year. And the fact that Rubio went down and they're like, you know what, we need a replacement for him and go get Rondo. I think that shows you that Kobe Altman and that staff in Cleveland is really committed to making the playoffs this year and not just relying on their young guys, right? Like, look what they're asking Kevin Love to do. Maybe they say, instead of starting 3 7-footers with Mobley, Jared Allen, and Markkanen, if we can find a way to get a guy like a Jerami Grant in there, he would make a lot more sense at the 3 than Markkanen. I also wouldn't I would never rule out Toronto, just because I think that Masai Ujiri's always got something up his sleeve, even though they've got a bunch of versatile wings there. In terms of the West, certainly you mentioned Utah. Another team I would continue to look at is Dallas. Jason Kidd didn't come to Dallas to struggle, and I think right now, Dallas just coming off of what they won about eight of their last 10, but they need some help for Luka, and a guy like Jerami Grant. I'd be real intrigued to see him in that lineup.
Yeah, I agree. That's not a team I had heard talked about very much, but as you say it, I feel like he would be a good fit with Luka and then with that team in general. And so as you talked about the Cavs, I couldn't help but think about the team that I think most Pistons fans hope Jerami gets traded to because of what the return that they dream up. And that's the Chicago Bulls, who I think fits in they're going for it, I would assume, with how well they've played, what they did this offseason. But do you think there's a real possibility they would turn loose of Patrick Williams in a Jerami Grant trade? Because that's every Pistons fan, that's a lot of Pistons fans' hope, is maybe with him being injured, they'll go for it this year. They trade for Jerami Grant, and then, they get Patrick Williams in return.
Well, there's no question that, strike while the iron's hot, right? And right now, people around the league are starting to scratch their head about the Bulls defensively, and a guy like Jerami Grant certainly could help them. I don't know, if Patrick Williams is somebody the Bulls would be willing to give up, and again, to the extent of his injury, as you mentioned, he's out for the year. So, do the Pistons want to take that back? And let's remember the Pistons, and again, obviously a much different caliber of player we're talking about here, but the Pistons medical team just turned down a deal for Bol. Right. And again, that was going to be more of like, let's throw something against the wall and see if it sticks. And they didn't even get to that point because the physical never went right. So, I have no idea what the Pistons would be thinking for a guy like Patrick Williams. But I definitely feel like next to DeRozan and Levine, especially with Alex Caruso out, the Bulls could use some perimeter defense. There's no doubt about it.
So I want to go into the three sophomores. I mean, Saban Lee, the three first-round sophomores, and more like this is just going to get a feel for what the league feels about these guys. Let's say they were going to package Jerami Grant for a bigger fish. They were going to go after someone better than him, so they needed to add someone to him. So the three sophomores, the first-round guys, Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, and Saddiq Bey. I think I know who has the most value around the league between those three guys. It's got to be Saddiq Bey, right, Jared?
No question. No, and I love Saddiq's game. I remember watching him in college. I'm a big Villanova fan. And I just think that I can't believe that he fell as far as he did, especially, with the pedigree he came from in Villanova. But, he's a guy who is struggling in terms of his efficiency this year, both two-pointers and 3-point field goals. And I think that'll eventually start to improve. I would imagine he's working on that. But yeah, I think he's got the highest upside there. And I'd be disappointed as a Pistons fan if he wasn't a part of the solution for the long-term future. And then, second, I would definitely go with Isaiah Stewart. I think still learning the league, still learning the game, but certainly an very undersized center. But a guy that goes and rebounds and hustles and plays hard. And you don't want to get into a fight with him after what we saw him do with LeBron a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, he's just really fun to watch in terms of his game. I don't know that he's necessarily a starting center on a team that's going deep into the playoffs, but if he's somebody that you can have coming off the bench for you on a good team, that he'd be excellent.
I agree. I want to talk about the three vets on the team real quick, and just to kind of see if maybe they needed to be attached and all that. So that's Kelly Olynyk, who's just coming back. There was a chance, I think, that maybe he was going to play Sunday night, so hopefully he's going on the West Coast trip. Trey Lyles, Corey Joseph. So just a quick breakdown. Olynyk, obviously the best player of those, and on a good contract, $12 million. And only $3 million of that's guaranteed in the third year. Lyles showing some really good stuff playing as a small ball 5, has a club option next year. Kojo, veteran point guard 5. Are any of those guys that would be intriguing around the league for a playoff team who's yeah, like we could bring them in, put them in our second unit, and they would be helpful.
Yeah, I think to a certain degree, all of those guys, Olynyk, you always have the injury concerns with him, but, he's been on teams that have been really good, whether it's, Boston or Miami throughout the years. And I think in terms of being, a stretch 4 or small ball stretch 5, I think, teams see a lot of value in that. I've been really impressed with Corey Joseph this year. And I don't know if it's just like a Dwane Casey thing, but second time that he's playing for Coach Casey, and he's put up some really good numbers. And I think he's having, if I recall, he's having the best shooting year of his career. And I think just a real stable backup point guard. That I don't know how much value he brings, but you look around the league, if there's an injury somewhere, he might be somebody that teams would try and target for, maybe a protected second round pick or something like that.
So I want to ask about Bol Bol, because you brought him up just real quick, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this at all, Jared. I did a breakdown on him and came away. It was a mixed bag. I've quickly tempered my expectations, but he was a big name, so it got a lot of publicity and a lot of talk. Obviously, it didn't go through. But just real quick, was there anything that Pistons fans should really feel like they missed out on with Bol Bol? What are your thoughts on Bol Bol? I know there hasn't been a lot of minutes or games. I understand that, but what are your thoughts on Bol Bol?
Well, listen, I try and temper my emotions from Summer League, because I know Summer League is what it is. But I got to call a lot of his games in Summer League this past year in Vegas, and we've heard for years this guy's just an athletic freak. He's a 7'2", looks like a center but plays like a point guard. And granted, he's not really had those spurts in real meaningful NBA minutes, but I think the Pistons made a great made a great reach, to say they didn't give up much to get him, and I think he's the type of guy where let's be honest about Detroit right now. They're in a position where they're not winning much, and due to the fact that they're not winning, they're probably not going to be very high on a lot of free agents lists. So if we can get a guy that we don't have to give up much for, that his ceiling is through the roof. Now, his basement is also potentially really low too, right? Like, we have nothing to lose. That's to me why it was so alarming that they failed his physical and didn't, overlook the physical aspect. And who knows if we'll ever find out what exactly the Pistons doctors didn't like about it, because I felt like it was a win-win situation for the Pistons to try and maybe uncover, a diamond in the rough and just say, it didn't work out for you in Denver for many reasons. We are low on talent. This guy has the potential to, if our player development people can get him in the weight room, get him on a meal plan, get him to learn more about how to play basketball, figure out defensively who we can match him up against. Maybe he becomes a guy that at the very least comes off the bench for us and gives us some meaningful minutes. And I think it's disappointing that he won't get that opportunity in Detroit. And I'm real intrigued to see what happens next for him. And, I was there draft night when he was the last guy in the green room, and just the look on his face, you tugged at your heartstrings. Like, you just felt awful for him, how he just slid on draft night. And now it feels like the same thing. Like, imagine the emotional roller coaster of a team who you felt, you could have been a part of, because they had championship aspirations in Denver, before all their injuries to Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray. They have the MVP of the league. They have a realistic chance of going far. You think you might be able to play a pivotal role. They can't find any minutes for you at all. And then they trade you. And then the trade, is public. It doesn't go through. Now you have to come back to Denver. Like, that's the worst case scenario in a trade. And I feel bad for Bol Bol. I hope that, emotionally, mentally, that he's okay.
Yeah, that's what I found, the same kind of emotions. And even though after I looked at the film, I had to temper my expectations, I was still excited. Don't get me wrong, because of all the things you talked about. And like you say, like he had to feel like whether he necessarily wanted to come to Detroit or not, we all are aware that it's not necessarily a huge destination and they're not very good right now. We all admit that. But he was probably going to get a chance to play. Like the Woj report said, he was in the plans to get minutes. And so even if that was exciting for him, like I'm going to get 50 games to 40 games to go prove myself and then sign a contract this offseason or get another contract. And that's what's interesting this summer. Like, is he going to get signed? Is he going to pass the physicals for those teams? And like you say, you just kind of have to feel for Bull in that whole situation. But to switch gears again, you brought up Coach Casey and kind of bringing out the best in Kojo. And so I just want to ask you, what's the kind of the league-wide perception of Coach Casey? And I'll just give you a quick rundown for people in Detroit or fans, not necessarily mine, but in general. And I don't mean to speak for all fans, but they don't always love I guess what they would say, a lack of X and O's creativity on offense. They really are clamoring for more ball screen usage for Caden Killian right now. But I do think people feel like he's good at turning these young guys into pros. Like he's a good guy, a great coach and mentor for this young group. Is that who he is league wide? Would you disagree or agree with any of that?
I think Dwane Casey is one of the most well-respected and well-liked coaches in the NBA. I've had a great relationship with him going back to his days in Toronto. I think that he is such a good people person. His relationships are really strong. He knows how to, despite being the age that he is, he still can connect with a younger generation. I think that's something really special, and not all coaches have that, and I think as a Pistons fan, you've got to wonder, is the grass greener, right? Like you may bring in like this X's and O's tacticianer who is incapable of connecting at any sort of emotional level with his players. And then that, kind of boils over and as great of a scheme or a system as you have, if you can't communicate and work with your players and your players don't respect you, it's not going to work. Like we've seen that time and time again in the NBA. So, the things that you don't like about Dwane Casey, I think are the things that, he'll eventually, once these players develop, and I think he's a really good player development guy. He works a lot with the young players. I think, I don't think he gets, and again, like people look at what happened in Toronto with Coach Casey, where the first year he's not there, the first year he's not there, they win a championship. And they're like, well, see, Coach Casey couldn't get it done in the playoffs. Well, you also have to take a step back and recognize that he built the foundation. Now, granted, they didn't have Kawhi, but he developed DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry was not an all-star until he came to play for Dwane Casey, right? Like, and those things that he did built the foundation for them to be able to go trade for Kawhi Leonard and then go win a championship. And I'm not saying that the Pistons are anywhere near that right now, but I think he's the type of guy you want in your organization to help build a foundation and set a culture for a successful future.
No, I agree. And I do feel like I've started to get the reputation as the Dwane Casey defender with like some of the Pistons fans I interact with on like a daily or weekly basis. And I can see like what he did with Hamidou Diallo. And again, I know you don't like follow the Pistons exclusively, but he set him for 5 games and they had a little spat on the bench. And then he started playing Hamidou Diallo again, and Hami's been balling out since. I'm like, maybe that's what Hamidou Diallo needed. And so like, I know like sometimes I don't want to see people can't see the big picture because I'm nobody to judge, but sometimes I don't think we always know the inner workings of we absolutely don't know the inner workings of what's going on. And so it was interesting to hear you talk about the relationships, and I hope Pistons fans that listen to this podcast hear that and kind of can respect that as well, that like, Coach Casey is that guy. And even if the X's and O's aren't exactly what everybody wants, to me, the culture, you said culture there at the end, like that's the most important thing for a young rebuilding team.
Yeah, right. And a lot of organizations do it different ways, but I believe it has to start, it's got to start with ownership and management, but the direct, front line has got to be the head coach and his coaching staff. So I think the Pistons are in good shape with Dwane Casey. And I think, the toughest thing for fans of teams that are going through what the Pistons is to have patience. And I know there are things that could be better and things that fans want to be better. But the biggest thing that needs to happen is that these players need to get older, get more mature, and learn, right? Like even if Cade Cunningham was the runaway rookie of the year right now, it still probably wouldn't lead to the Pistons being in a position where they're in the playoff mix, right? Like, and you can't just look at numbers. Certainly you want more wins, but I think what you're developing here is a culture and a mindset and an organization that is building a foundation for the future and not just trying to put random pieces together and say, all right, let's go try and be a 500 team and compete for the last playoff spot. No, like the Pistons have greater aspirations than that.
One person I've given a lot of credit to for that culture and that vision is Troy Weaver. What is kind of his perception around the NBA? What is your perception of Troy Weaver in terms of GM? And again, like I think sometimes we judge every micro move and not necessarily the macro of everything. Obviously, he's made some mistakes. Like in 12 months, he's probably made some, like we could nitpick. I have no doubt about that. But just again, from the outside, big picture, what do you think about Troy Weaver thus far?
I like him. You know, I like some of the moves that he's done. You know, some of these guys he's brought in, some of the guys he's taken a shot on. And I don't think he's done, right? Like I think they still have a long way to go here, but you know, he seems to be a creative mind that is willing to try different things, whether it be through the CBA or the salary cap or you know, and like this bowl thing. I'm sure he is probably the most disappointed that this didn't work because he you know said we have nothing to lose in trying to get a guy like that. So I think overall he's viewed as a really well respected guy around the league.
Yeah, and I've said that he has 3 big moves coming up, and then I think we can start to evaluate things a little bit more then. You know, what does he end up doing with Jerami Grant? Obviously, they're going to have a pretty high 2022 draft pick and a little bit of cap space for the first time in his tenure this upcoming season, which he's done a pretty good job, in my opinion, cleaning up the books for the Detroit Pistons compared to what he inherited. And so I'm a big Weaver fan as well. I think a lot of fans still are. But I definitely wanted to ask your thoughts on him. But we have about 10 or 15 minutes here. Wes, I'm going to bring you in, and we're going to play Sheed or Sham here and talk some topics just around the NBA about some of the upcoming opponents for the Pistons. The first one will be the Warriors. And after Wes asks the question, Jared, I will give you a chance to talk about Steph Curry as well, because that's you had a take on him on SiriusXM that I really like. So, Wes, get us started here with Sheed or Sham, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and the first question is going to be about Steph Curry too, so it works out real well. So like always, Sheed is true, Sham is false. Jared, will have you go first, so I'll ask you, Stephen Curry leads the Warriors in assists per game right now. Sheed or Sham?
Sham.
I'll go Sheed just to be the opposite.
It is Sham. It's Draymond Green, 7.4.
All right, so Jared, Steph Curry, I listened to you on SiriusXM talk about his shooting and just like how great of a shooter he was and kind of how he changed. Like, can you just give a little bit of that to our listeners, like what you kind of felt see in him or have seen it from him in terms of the shooting? This was when he had broke the NBA career 3-point shooting record.
Yeah, I think the thing for me, and I know maybe people feel like we talk too much about Steph Curry because he's such a likable guy and you know he's fun to watch, but I just hope people are not taking for granted what he has done for the game. And he truly has transformed the way that the game is played. And people, you know, are constantly trying to compare him to whether it be Ray Allen or Reggie Miller and say, well, if Ray Allen or Reggie Miller played in this era, then they would be doing what Steph Curry is doing. And I don't see that at all. And it's no disrespect to Ray or Reggie or any other great shooters. The thing about Steph is he came into the Ray Allen and Reggie Miller era of the NBA, and Steph Curry made it the Steph Curry era by extending his shot, by being so efficient. And I think what we lose track of is, yes, Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time, but he's not just the greatest shooter of all time. He's arguably one of the 5 greatest point guards of all time with the way he is a ball handler, with the way he absolutely wreaks havoc on defenses when he doesn't have the ball. You know, I heard Dwane Wade say this the other day, and I think it's so true. Steph Curry might be more dangerous without the basketball than he is with the basketball. And that's just insane for a guy who is the greatest shooter of all time. So I think that people just want to say, and remember, when Steph Curry was shooting as many threes as he was, back when at the end of Mark Jackson's tenure and right when Steve Kerr came, people were scratching their heads saying, why are you doing this? How does a coach greenlight this? It's bad for the game. It's too many 3-point shots. It's too many 3-point attempts. And Steve Kerr, I had a conversation with him about this. He goes, Jared, when he's doing at a clip of 40% or better, why would I tell him to stop, right? And he, in Steph Curry, is the one who forced his coach to allow him to do this because he was so darn good. If other players were this good, then they would have forced their coaches to do this in prior eras. We forget that Steph Curry made it the Steph Curry era of shooting, and that's the bottom line. So no disrespect to anybody else, but he is one of the 5 greatest point guards of all time, on top of being one of the greatest shooters of all time, the greatest shooter of all time. And I think we shouldn't take his greatness for granted.
No, I love it. Like I just remember listening to that and it's like, this is because I'm a huge Steph Curry fan. Like outside of Detroit, he's probably my favorite player. He's one of my favorite players of all time. And I just was like, yeah, like like you said, if he wasn't so good at it, he wouldn't have been allowed to do it. So he deserved just as much credit as Steve Kerr. You talked about him without the ball. So real quick before we bring Wes back in, and I think a lot of Pistons will say that, Rip Hamilton was great at this as well. And he absolutely was. But you've watched a lot more NBA and a lot closer than I have. Is he the greatest mover without the ball that you've personally witnessed?
Yeah, I mean, Reggie Miller is right up there too. I remember him, just driving defenses crazy with his inability to move. But to me, the thing about Steph Curry that he has really highlighted for me is watching a Warriors game and then go watching most other games and just seeing the lack of man movement. It's just mind boggling. Like, don't you understand that he gets so many, like everyone knows, even with Klay Thompson and when the Warriors were at their best, like, and maybe not when Kevin Durant was there, but the Warriors as we know who they are now, I got to imagine in the scouting meeting or in film session, like the first, second, and third thing you're talking about is Steph Curry, yet he still gets so many wide open looks. Well, why is that? It's not because defenses forget about him. It's because he makes their life miserable, right? And I think, just seeing other teams, granted, I'm not asking other teams or other players to be like Steph in his ability to shoot, but just the simple things. And you as a coach, I'm sure, preach this to your players, like go fill the spot. Like, a player sets a screen, leaves the spot. Now go to that spot. And Steph Curry does it better than anybody I've ever seen in terms of his ability to just take advantage of the defense not being where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. And it's such a good point about him or watching that team and then trying to watch other offenses. So, all right, Wes, I'll bring you back in. I know we got off on one there, but I definitely wanted to give Jared a chance to talk about that with Steph Curry. So question number 2.
Yeah, no problem. And we'll stick with the Warriors again, and I will ask Jared you first. So as of this recording, Sheed or Sham, Klay Thompson has not missed a single free throw.
Ooh. I would say Sheed.
Yeah, I'm going to go Sheed as well.
It is Sheed. Yep, he's 5 for 5 so far.
Nice. And I'm 2 for 2.
You are 2 for 2, and I'm on a 3-game winning streak with this game. So trying to knock it off here. So I believe we're moving on to the next opponent. Wes, is that correct?
We are. Yep, we're on to the Kings. And Jared, since you're the guest, I'll have you keep going first. So Sheed or Sham, De'Aaron Fox is shooting 25% from 3 this year.
Ooh. He's been good this year. I'll say Sheed.
Okay, I'm going to actually say Sham.
It is Sheed. He's shooting 25% on 3.7 attempts per game.
Wow. I thought his numbers were a lot better this year. That's crazy.
Yeah, that I wouldn't have guessed. I didn't figure there was any way that was. I'm going to look up his other years while you throw the next one at us, Wes.
Yep, sounds good. Jared's still you. So Sheed or Sham, Tyrese Halliburton is 3rd on the Kings in blocks per game.
Ooh, I would say Sheed on that.
You said Halliburton is 3rd?
Yes.
Jared said Sham. I'm going to say Sham. I got to get back into it.
It is Sheed.
Oh, 4 for 4.
Yeah, he's averaging 0.7 blocks per game. Then Alex Len's on top of him with 0.8, and Rashawn Holmes is leading the way with 1.
Wow. So real quick, so De'Aaron Fox career 3-point. So his rookie year, 30.7, 37, 29, 32.2, 25. So career low 3-point percentage this season for De'Aaron Fox.
Wow.
Jared, real quick, what are your thoughts on Tyrese Halliburton? That's a name that comes up a lot around Pistons fans because of the draft, taking Killian Hayes number 7. Obviously, Halliburton went after him. What have you liked or about Halliburton so far in his young career?
Yeah, love his game. Two-way player, guy that can play with or without the ball. Kind of not all that different than the situation you guys are going in Detroit, where with Killian Hayes being drafted and then you bring in Cade, can they play together? The same thought process is like, why would you draft Tyrese Halliburton when you have De'Aaron Fox? But I think they've proven they can coexist. He's just plays the right way, plays hard. Again, he probably on a really good team is a sixth man. But I think he's got a bright future.
All right, so we have 2 more questions. I actually don't have a chance to even win this one.
All right, so I've knocked you off. I've ended your streak.
You've already ended the streak, but just for the sake of the game and for the work that Wes put into the Sheet or Sham questions, we will go ahead and do them. So we got 2 more, Wes. Go ahead and give us the second to last one.
Yep, so we're going to the Nuggets now. So Jared, Facundo Campazzo leads the Nuggets in steals per game, Sheet or Sham?
That's Sheet.
Jared sounded really confident with that one, so I'm going to say Sheet as well.
I just did a Nuggets game, so if I got this one wrong, I'm going to be mad at myself.
It is Sham. Yeah, he's second, 1.2. Jokic first, 1.3.
Oh, wow.
Wow, Jokic leads the Nuggets in steals. Interesting. Okay. All right, last one, Wes.
Yeah, last one. So going to fourth quarter scoring for the Nuggets. Bones Highland is second on the Nuggets in points per game in the fourth quarter. Sheet or Sham, Jared?
We just had a massive game last night. I would say that's Sham.
I'm going to go Sheed.
It is Sheed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Finally got one.
There you go. Yeah. He's averaging 3.6 points in the fourth quarter. Jokic again first, 4.7.
All right. Well, Jared crushed me on that one, knocked me off my 3-game win streak, but I was kind of expecting for that one not to go quite as well. Jared, thank you for playing. We always hope our guests enjoy that. Thank you for joining us. I just give you a real quick chance here. Let everybody know where they can find everything you're doing, Twitter, all the stuff you're putting out, obviously on TNT and NBA TV. And thank you for joining us. We'd love to have you back, but let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun talking with you guys. Love hearing the passion in your voice and how much you guys love your team and the NBA as a whole. Please give me a follow on Jared S. Greenberg on Twitter, at Jared S. Greenberg on Twitter or Instagram, and on NBA TV a few nights a week hosting Game Time. And you could also catch me next week. I'll be doing a Warriors Dallas game. So really, really good Luka versus Steph Curry game. Hopefully Steph's wrist is okay. And we get the Warriors and Mavs on TNT next Tuesday.
Awesome. That'll be an exciting one. Make sure you check that one out. As always, I want to thank the producer of the Motor City Hoops podcast, Wes Davenport, for everything he does for me and Motor City Hoops as a whole. I also want to thank our listeners for your follows, subscriptions, likes, downloads, but most of all, your interactions. Please always feel free to drop a comment on the Detroit Bad Boy article or hit me up with a Twitter DM or Facebook message. My coaching schedule continues to be busy as we start our league tournament this week, but I will have an instant recap episode for you on Wednesday night after the Kings game, or most of you, that probably ends up being Thursday morning with the late start. And we'll be back next week with Pistons fan, University of Michigan alum, and former Olympic bronze and silver medalist runner in the 1,500 meters, Nick Willis. That's sure to be an episode you don't want to miss. Thank you. Go Pistons, and we'll talk to you soon.
Pistons need a 3, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it.